Welcome to Design Domination, where you'll gain confidence, clarity, and a competitive edge in a crowded marketplace so you can dominate your competition. Hi, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Colleen Grotzer, and in this episode of Design Domination, I'm getting into what to do when you screw up a client project. Stick around to get lots of tips for how to handle this sticky situation. Now, a screw up is bound to happen at some point with a project in your career. And some screw ups are a quick and easy fix, like fixing a typo that you might have made on a website or in a digital document. Other screw ups, though, can really prove costly to the client and to you, like missing a deadline for something that was time sensitive or having to pay to reprint a brochure. The circumstances and how you handle that screw up affect your credibility, reputation, and bottom line. Now, I've had a few oops in my career, and they're pretty embarrassing. Luckily, they were a very long time ago, but mortifying and stressful nonetheless. One in particular involved a prospect that I was working on a website design estimate for. The client had given me access to the site, the back end of the site, with my email address. And that was so we could look at the back end and see how some things were set up. Well, I had just started working with a particular subcontractor, a web developer, to help me out with some of the heavier functionality that was way beyond my coding experience. So I needed him to go look at the back end, but I didn't want to go and add his email address too, because I thought, well, that might appear unusual to them. And I mean, he is on my team, so then they might have been like, well, why doesn't he have a certain email address or whatever, right? And I couldn't give him access to my email address. Well, because we were new to working together at that time, the web developer and me, we hadn't built up trust yet, And so I'm thinking, well, what if he logs into the site and accidentally moves or deletes something, right? Well, I should have just asked the client, the prospect, to add his email address, because what I did instead was copy the site over to a development server, on my end, so he could take a look at it and then give me an estimate for his part of the work. And then I was going to delete the site copy immediately. Of course. Shortly after that, though, I got an email from the prospect that made my stomach completely drop. Someone there had come across the site because of their analytics, and they were furious that I had copied the site, even just to review it. Looking back on it, who could blame them? I was new to them, and what I did broke their trust right off the bat. And it didn't matter that for many years, I'd had a good reputation with my clients and a very strong work ethic. It was really dumb of me to do that without their permission. And needless to say, they were no longer interested in me giving them an estimate. Here I thought I was taking precautions to prevent anything from potentially happening to their site while we looked around. I remember how stupid I felt, and I just burst into tears. Now, another time, I had taken on some web development work from a colleague who had designed a site and then needed help coding it. And I did all that I was able to do, within my expertise. And then I needed help, full-on web developer, to help with a small portion that was going to include some custom functionality. So I talked with someone that I trusted, and I explained that the only part that he needed to work on was this one particular custom functionality. Everything else was done. And then he went on to talk about wanting to put my CSS into Sass, and that he wanted to copy the site to his own server and work on it there. I specifically asked him not to do that. And that was because of my experience in the past with developers who had worked on their own servers, and I didn't have access to that site. And then the developer disappeared. So what happened? He got sick and he couldn't work on the site. So he had gone ahead and copied over the site, which I only found out about after the fact. I kept looking at my copy of it and thinking, okay, nothing's done. What's going on here? And then after about, I think maybe a week, maybe more, of not getting any response, from what I recall, I was sweating bullets. I was on fire, actually. I was sick in the stomach. I wasn't sleeping. Okay, because the client was asking me about it and I didn't know what to say. I had no control over the project at this point. And I was furious for being put into that situation in the first place, especially that exact situation that I had tried to avoid. I've been on both sides of the situation, screwing up myself, right? And also having someone else do that to me, that was still my responsibility too, But anyway, now that I've got that off my chest, if and when you discover a problem, like you've made a mistake, don't wait and hope the client does not notice. Because if you do nothing and hope the client doesn't find out, and then they do, it will be far worse. Okay, that's because it will make you look like you didn't care or that you didn't, do your due diligence in checking your work. The other thing is that they may no longer trust you. They may not want to work with you anymore. They definitely wouldn't be referring others to you either. Okay, so you'll get more respect by acknowledging a mistake and dealing with it head on. The next thing you want to do is assess the situation. So even though it might be difficult and your emotions are on fire, try to calm down and assess things. You just don't want to go and react and contact the client right away. I mean, you want to contact them ASAP, but get things together first. Calm down and take a few minutes to figure things out before you do that. And that's because the severity of the situation and how you handle it are extremely important. Was the mistake your fault? Was it someone else's fault? How did it happen? Could it have been avoided? Did the client's actions contribute to it at all? Did they set up an unrealistic schedule that you agreed to? And then, some circumstances may have been out of your hands and some not. Contact the client then to schedule a video call or an in-person meeting with them so that you can explain what happened and how, if you know how, or why it happened. Was it an honest mistake on your part? Was it a hole in your process? Did you have a death in the family or have an emergency? Whatever the reason, take responsibility and apologize sincerely. Okay, and then you want to make sure to present some ideas for how you plan to fix it. Never go to them with the problem without explaining how you plan to fix it. This can help the client maintain trust with you. Resolve the issue as best you can. And how you do this depends on the circumstances. Let's say you had an emergency and you missed a print deadline, right? You could offer to pay a rush fee to the printer to get it done on time. If you made a mistake while laying out a document, you can explain that you'll perform better checks or you'll hire someone to check the work in the future to prevent it from happening again. You might also offer to take them to lunch or send them a gift. If the situation wasn't terrible and you were able to resolve it easily, maybe you send them a gift card for something they would enjoy along with something to make them laugh, like, headache medicine with a card that says something like, sorry for all the headache I caused. But you have to tread carefully with bringing it up again, especially if it can never be considered a laughing matter or if the mistake killed the relationship. You could also offer a discount. Now, if you do decide to go that route, at least list the full price on the invoice and then the discounted amount. And if they've already paid you, you could simply offer a discount off the next invoice if you're going to continue working together. Otherwise, you could give a partial refund. Now, speaking of that, I once had a client I was doing layout and editing for. And in the beginning, she asked me about guaranteeing my work. And this is a rare request, by the way. Now, what she meant was that if she found a mistake at any given time, would I give the organization a partial refund? Seriously. So she would literally go back and look at the printed piece after it was done every month. She would go back and just like she was on the lookout for mistakes, like as if on purpose to find stuff to pick apart to try to get a refund. I refused that request because it's completely unreasonable. Even though I was doing the layout and the editing, other people played a part in approving the work. The authors of the manuscripts did, the organization did. If all these people reviewed it and accepted it as accurate and done, it wasn't reasonable to expect me to give money back if they found something later. It wasn't like they approved it and then there was a mistake made after the fact. They were looking at everything and that stuff was always fine. What they approved is what printed. Then the next thing you need to think about is how to prevent future mistakes. Okay? And having good processes and policies in place can help you prevent problems in the first place. Okay? But also in the future. If you're a solo designer, you want to have a trusted designer to back you up in case of an emergency on your end, or if you won't be available and something comes up. If you're not good at managing projects yourself and you miss deadlines, use a project management system or a calendar to schedule key project dates to remind you of what's coming due so you stay on track. And then, because it's inevitable that you will eventually have a computer issue, make sure to back up your computer every night to an external hard drive. That's what I use at least. Or cloud storage. Now, if a miscommunication somewhere in the process was the cause, Are there additional questions that you could ask before you start a new project? Did you hire someone to help you with the work and they dropped the ball? Or did someone you hire to help not do a good job? You know what? Don't work with them again. Hire someone else and ask for references and ask about their reliability. Did you take on too much work at one time? Did the client have an unrealistic schedule? Be sure to speak up next time about that. Okay? Or be the one in charge of scheduling the projects and allow more time than you expect. It's also important, after all that's done, not to live in your mistake and dwell in your feelings around it for so long. But hey, I get it, and I often beat myself up about things like that, okay? But you don't want it to affect your productivity, you don't want it to affect your confidence and the quality of work on other projects. You don't want your other work to suffer. And it may take some time for the client to get over this, right? If they decide to continue working with you. They may or may not want to work with you anymore, like in my situation with the prospect and their website. But if you do continue working together, you want to commit to making any necessary changes to prevent what happened from happening again. So do great work and maintain a good relationship with the client so they have more positive interactions with you. And the other thing is that you can consider getting E&O insurance, which stands for errors and omissions. It's also known as professional liability insurance. This can help you cover the cost of an expensive mistake, such as a reprint of a brochure, for example. It doesn't cover everything, but it's good to have just in case. I have mine through Hiscox through Freelancers Union, which is 1/10 of the cost for the same plan, for the same policy through an insurance broker. You can find out more about that in episode 56, Protect Your Freelance Business from Catastrophe. And also be sure to check out the episode on how to keep clients coming back. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If this content was helpful, you can support the podcast by buying me a coffee. It might actually end up being a glass of wine or some tea, but you could go to buymeacoffee.com/creativeboost.